The stagecoach rolled through the cold dusk like a wounded animal, one wheel squealing against the frozen ground. Inside Crooked Creek Manor, the Baron waited with the rigid silence of a man who trusted no one. He had hired a widow to cook for his daughter only because the child had stopped eating, stopped laughing, stopped being anything but a shadow in the halls. Martha Dale stepped through the manor door carrying nothing but a worn bag and the quiet grit of a woman who had survived loss. She was 33, steady and soft-spoken, with eyes that held both grief and strength. The Baron had warned her on arrival. "You are help, not family." She simply nodded and went to the kitchen, lighting a fire that seemed to breathe life into the whole house. Clara, the Baron's small, frightened daughter, watched Martha with wary eyes. Governesses had come and gone, leaving rules but no warmth. Martha offered neither demands nor false sweetness. Instead, she knelt beside the girl and said gently, "I pray for you like I prayed for my own." The words settled over the child like a blanket, softening something in her chest. The Baron noticed the change. He also noticed Martha's way of mending torn sleeves and humming while she stirred soup. She did things the Baron did not understand. She left the nursery door cracked because children need to hear life happening, and she set extra wood near the hearth so the house would never feel cold. But peace in Crooked Creek was always temporary. One night, Belmont's hired men stumbled into the manor, loud with drink and threats. They demanded payment for a fake debt, knocking over chairs and frightening Clara into tears. The Baron reached for his pistol, but Martha stepped ahead of him, putting herself between the men and the child with a resolve that stunned everyone in the room. "No one frightens a child under my care," she said. The Baron fired a warning shot, chaos erupted, and the men fled into the night, leaving a trail of threats behind them. When quiet returned, Martha found Clara trembling behind the curtains and held her close. Later, by the dim firelight, the Baron studied Martha's calm face. "You shouldn't have put yourself in danger," he muttered. "I did what any mother would do," she replied softly. "You are not her mother." "No," Martha said, "but she deserves someone who prays for her like one." The Baron had never wanted a wife, never wanted anyone close enough to leave him again. Yet as Martha carried the sleeping child upstairs, he felt something unsettling and unfamiliar, the first crack in a man who had built his life out of walls. Dawn came cold and blue over Crooked Creek Manor, the kind of morning that made breath hang heavy in the air. Martha was already in the kitchen, grinding coffee with steady movements, while Clara sat nearby, rubbing sleep from her eyes. The girl ate now, talked now, laughed now, small miracles the Baron noticed from the doorway, but never admitted aloud. Outside the manor, trouble ripened. Hank Belmont, the rival rancher with more greed than cattle sense, had started pushing his claim on the watercourse. Men whispered that he'd stolen fencing, poisoned a trough, and bribed 2 county clerks. The Baron responded with a cold, stubborn fury, riding out before sunrise with the black-eyed captain at his side. Martha watched him leave each day and sensed an old wound beneath his pride. A man doesn't guard land that fiercely unless he's guarding something broken inside him too. As Belmont's pressure grew, Martha quietly strengthened the home. She stocked root vegetables, dried meat, and taught Clara how to braid rope, carry messages, and keep calm when fear scratched at the door. Bravery, she said, is mostly gentle hands doing hard things. But Crooked Creek's peace shattered one evening when Martha found the windmill's ropes slashed, the trough overturned, and hoofprints leading into the ravine. Belmont's warning. The Baron's jaw tightened like iron. "They want to fight," he growled. "Then they'll get one." That night, Belmont's men returned, this time creeping through the stable. Martha heard them first. She woke Clara, hid her in the pantry, then slipped into the hall with nothing but a fire poker. The Baron met the intruders in the dark. Shouts burst, boots slammed, and the black-eyed captain tackled a man clear through a saddle rack. Martha struck another across the arm, surprising even herself. The intruders fled after a brutal scuffle, leaving threats behind like rattlesnake skins. Once the sheriff arrived and the house settled, the Baron paced the parlor, furious at the world, furious at vulnerability. Martha watched him, sewing a torn sleeve she had grabbed during the fight. "You should have stayed out of danger," he said. She shook her head. "Children need safety more than rules." "I can protect this house on my own," he insisted. "If that were true," she said gently, "Clara wouldn't have been hiding in a pantry tonight." The truth hit him sharp. The Baron looked at her, seeing not hired help, but a woman whose courage filled the empty spaces in the manor. In the quiet that followed, he asked the question he had never asked any woman. "Will you stay?" "For her, not for me." Martha didn't answer right away. She simply tended to his bruised knuckles and said, "I will stay as long as she needs someone to pray for her." And for the first time in years, the Baron felt his walls shift. Spring thawed only the land, not the tempers in Crooked Creek. The grass returned soft and green, yet every fence post seemed to lean toward trouble. Hank Belmont's anger had grown meaner since the night his men were driven from a manor. Rumor said he wanted not just water rights now, but humiliation for the Baron. The courthouse hearing became the next battlefield. The Baron rode in wearing a coat too stiff for comfort. Martha beside him to watch Clara and make sure no surprises lurked in town. Inside the wooden courtroom, Belmont's lawyers piled forged deeds and whisper-thin testimonies, trying to paint the Baron as a man who had stolen land generations ago. The Baron's voice was steady but tight. "My father dug those wells with his own hands. Everyone here knows it." Some nodded. Some didn't. 3 long days passed in that room, the air smelling of ink and sweat. Martha kept Clara calm with quiet stories, her presence grounding the Baron more than he admitted. She even found a traveling clerk from New Orleans, sharp-tongued and quick-minded, who helped uncover a missing record that favored the Baron's claim. It wasn't victory, but it was hope. Then Belmont made his boldest move. A ranch hand loyal to the Baron went missing. By evening, he was found tied to a wagon wheel at the edge of the boundary line, blood on his shirt and a warning carved into the dirt: "Back down or bury more." Martha helped cut him free, her hands shaking only after Clara was out of sight. The Baron's rage threatened to boil over. "I'll end this with a bullet," he growled. Martha stepped in front of him, palms open. "If you become what he is, you've already lost." It was the first time in years someone had spoken to him without fear. The Baron's breath steadied, though his pride burned. But Belmont wasn't done. One afternoon, as Martha and Clara walked back from the creek, 2 masked men lunged from behind a cedar tree. Clara screamed. Martha swung her basket with fierce desperation, and the commotion carried across the field to the Baron, who was riding home at that exact moment. He charged in like a storm, pistol raised, shouting Clara's name. The men fled, one leaving a scrap of Belmont's ranch brand on his coat. Afterward, Clara clung to Martha with shaking hands while the Baron stood nearby, shaken himself. She could have been taken, he whispered, horrified by how close he'd come to losing her. Martha rested a hand on Clara's back. "I won't let harm near her. But you cannot fight Belmont alone." For the first time, the Baron didn't argue. The part ends with a tense public confrontation at the county fair. Belmont sneers across the dusty field, mocking the Baron's widow nanny and his false claim. The Baron steps forward, fists clenched but voice controlled, and challenges him to settle the land dispute in a public auction, an act bold enough to shock the entire town. Belmont agrees, smiling like a man who believes he's already won. Martha watches from the crowd, feeling the coming storm in her bones. The auction day rose under a sky the color of pewter, heavy with unshed snow. Townsfolk gathered in the open tent beside the church, their boots stamping frost from the ground. Belmont stood tall and smug near the front, while the Baron waited stiff-backed, a man preparing to gamble everything he owned. Martha stayed close to Clara, her hand steady on the girl's small shoulder. The bidding began sharp and fast. Belmont threw down numbers like bullets, each one meant to break the Baron's resolve. But neighbors, quiet folks who had watched Martha mend clothes, share bread, and comfort their children in the blizzard nights, began to step forward. "I'll cover $10 of that," a ranch wife called out. "And I'll match her," said an old Norwegian cattleman. Soon small hands of loyalty stitched themselves around the Baron's dwindling funds. Martha moved through the crowd, offering warm biscuits and quiet encouragement, reminding people that Crooked Creek wasn't just land, it was home. Still, Belmont countered each bid with a smirk that made the Baron's knuckles turn white. Then the storm finally broke. Snow came hard and sudden, driving the crowd into confusion. The auctioneer tried to continue shouting prices, but the wind stole his voice. The tent shook. The ground blurred. By the time the last number was called, the Baron had won the disputed corner of land by a single, desperate bid. One paid partly in coin, partly in favors, and partly in the goodwill Martha had unknowingly gathered around the manor. Belmont stormed away with a curse that promised nothing good. But there was no time to celebrate. The blizzard thickened, burying fences and cutting off roads. The Baron and Martha raced home with Clara bundled in blankets, the horses fighting the wind. Once inside, Martha moved through the manor with the practiced grace of someone who had survived hard winters before, stacking wood, boiling water, patching drafts with quilts. For 2 days the storm pressed the house like a giant hand. Families from nearby homesteads stumbled to the manor seeking shelter. Martha opened the door to every one of them. The grand hall filled with cold, hungry souls, and together they built a community under the Baron's roof. The Baron joined Martha in hauling blankets, feeding livestock, and tending sick travelers. In quieter moments, Clara curled beside Martha near the hearth while the Baron watched, something soft and lost flickering in his eyes. On the third night, a young boy collapsed from fever. Martha took charge with calm authority, mixing herbs, setting cool cloths, whispering steady reassurances. The Baron stayed beside her, handing whatever she needed, learning the shape of gentleness through her hands. Together, they fought the fever back from the edge. When morning finally came and the storm eased, the boy's breathing steadied. The Baron looked at Martha with unguarded gratitude. "You saved him," he said quietly. Martha shook her head. "No, we did." The Baron held her gaze just a little too long, and something shifted between them, something neither dared name. Yet both felt like a spark warming a cold room. Outside, the world lay blanketed in white, but inside Crooked Creek Manor, warmth slowly, quietly, began to take root. Spring crept into Crooked Creek like a shy visitor, melting the last of the winter drifts and revealing the deep ruts left behind by fear and survival. The manor warmed, but the county had not forgotten the feud. Belmont nursed his bitterness like a wounded wolf, waiting for his chance to strike again. The final court ruling approached, the one that would decide whether the Baron kept the water rights his family had held for generations. Martha prepared Clara for the trip into town, braiding her hair and packing biscuits in a small cloth bundle. The Baron watched them with a strange, unspoken longing, these quiet domestic moments he had never expected to have again. But the morning of the hearing brought chaos. The traveling clerk from New Orleans, the sharp, quick-minded woman who had uncovered the missing records, was nowhere to be found. Martha sensed trouble immediately. Within the hour, a trembling ranch boy stumbled to the manor with news. Belmont's men had taken her, hoping to sabotage the Baron's defense. The Baron's face went cold. He's crossed the final line. Martha didn't hesitate. Then we go get her back. They rode hard toward the abandoned barn by the ridge, snowmelt turning the path into mud. Clara remained at the manor with neighbors, watching the trail vanish behind the horses. Martha's heart beat fast, but her hand stayed steady. She had faced loss before and refused to face it again. Inside the barn, Belmont's men guarded the clerk. The Baron strode in with a pistol drawn, but Belmont had anticipated him. A shot cracked, echoing through the rafters. Martha cried out as the Baron staggered, the bullet grazing deep across his shoulder. He dropped to one knee, teeth clenched against pain. Martha rushed forward, shielding him with her own body. "You want to fight?" she said, voice steady as stone. "Then know this. I won't let you take one more thing from this family." Her words struck Belmont harder than any bullet. The sheriff, who had trailed them quietly after Martha sent a coded message through a ranch boy, burst in with deputies. The barn erupted into shouts, scuffling boots, and clattering weapons. Belmont was wrestled to the dirt, cursing Martha's name as if her strength offended him more than defeat. The clerk was freed. The Baron, pale with pain, leaned on Martha the whole way back. The verdict came that very afternoon. The judge, after reviewing the final documents, ruled firmly in the Baron's favor. Belmont lost the land dispute and was fined heavily for harassment and kidnapping. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Justice had come, hard and late, but unmistakable. Outside, the Baron swayed from blood loss. Martha steadied him, pressing against his good side. "You risked your life," she whispered. "For you," he breathed, "and for her. I don't know when it happened, but you're both the only things that make this house feel like a home." Back at the manor, Martha stitched his wound with gentle hands. Clara sat beside them, holding her father's uninjured hand as he winced. When she finished, Martha tried to step back, but the Baron caught her wrist. "Stay," he said softly. "Not because I need help, because we're better when you're with us." Martha hesitated only a moment before nodding. "Then I'll stay, as long as she needs me, and as long as you want a house warmed, not ruled." Clara climbed into Martha's lap, wrapping her arms around her waist. The Baron watched, eyes softening like thawing ice. And just like that, Crooked Creek Manor ceased being a fortress and finally became a home.